Welcome back into the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. I am Steven Serda, joined as always by my guy Rocky Magana, Kramer Sansone in the background, helping us keep this thing afloat. The Kansas City Chiefs fall to the Buffalo Bills 24-20. And while the outcome of this game is disappointing, Rocky, man, I was so impressed with the Chiefs defense today. And, Mahomes, I know he throws the pick on the final drive of the game, and they had a chance and they had time to try to drive down, and it's just you got a glimpse of what Buffalo invested to beat this team. Like everything that Buffalo did this offseason was to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And a lot of it starts with Von Miller and how just incredible he is. There's a reason he's a future first ballot Hall of Famer. And that pick was caused by the pressure that Von Miller was putting on Patrick Mahomes, which is what he did multiple times today. He was a menace and a problem for Andrew Wiley all throughout the entire game. But I come away from this contest not really being upset that the Chiefs lost. Like, obviously, it's a lot more fun to do these post-game shows when they win, Rocky, but I come away from this game thinking these are the two best teams in the NFL. And I was still like, had my doubts about the Chiefs and the pass catchers and the way it was all kind of working together. And then they head into this game with all of these injuries in the secondary. And I come out of this game saying, yeah, we just got the opportunity to watch the two best teams in the NFL go head to head. They played another incredible game, and they're going to see each other again in the postseason.
I agree with everything you said, except for, the Chiefs had the game multiple times. You can't throw interceptions in the red zone if you're Patrick Mahomes. You can't miss field goals if you're Harrison Butker. The opportunities to win this game were there for the Chiefs. They just didn't capitalize on them. Yeah, they were depleted on defense. I think the defense gave a very valiant performance based on what they had. I don't come away from this discouraged. Like you said, I think that this was the two best teams in the NFL, and I think they went toe-to-toe. I think you play this game 10 times, and they probably split it 5-5, over the course of the year. So it's kind of hard, to come away from this dejected, and you've come away a little encouraged because you know that, the Chiefs are right there with the best teams in the NFL yet again, and they're going to be contenders yet again. But the problem is that you just see these opportunities where they had the chance to put the game away, or they had the chance to extend their lead, and they just didn't capitalize on them. And this is something I feel like with Andy Reid teams in general, there's always kind of been a bit of an issue with putting teams away or extending the lead. And this wasn't a situation where he tried to coast in the fourth quarter, but they just didn't capitalize on the opportunities they had.
So, yeah, I agree with virtually everything that you said, Rocky. And there was kind of on that final Bills touchdown drive where they took the lead, I found myself getting a little frustrated with Andy Reid because I was like, and you got to start thinking about taking these timeouts sooner. Like, and it's something with Andy, we talk about it, I feel like every single week, where there's never any urgency late in these games with him, or, going into halftime where you're like, burn the timeouts, get the ball back, conserve the clock. What are we doing here? And it didn't seem like there was enough urgency from the Chiefs sideline to, hey, let's think about just letting the Bills score and giving them the points so we can get back on the field and go make something happen. And I understand the logic is you want to stop them and you want your defense to come up and make big plays, but at some point you have to concede. We should start thinking about that. That process should start kind of leaking into what we're thinking about doing here. And, you would have liked to have seen Mahomes actually have an opportunity on that final drive. And that's just the way that it goes sometimes when we've got this quarterback here in Kansas City who does incredible things on a weekly basis. And the reason that we think the Chiefs are never out of it, 12 seconds in the first half, and they got a field goal to tie it heading into the break. And, there's a reason we think that way here in Kansas City, but it just doesn't always work out that way. And you went up against, in my opinion, the best team in the NFL today, and you went toe-to-toe with them. Yeah, you left some things on the table, but the Bills did too. The Bills didn't play a perfect game offensively by any means. And I think this was just a really, really hard fought football game, and you'd like to see the Chiefs come away with the win. But ultimately, I'm just encouraged by how competitive they were against this team because I do think this Bills team is for real. And we got a glimpse of it with Von Miller on that final play of the game. And that's why they brought him in, because they were deep at pass rush last year, but they didn't have a guy who could close games out. And Von Miller is the dude that closes games out in the NFL. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. And that's why inevitably he was the deciding factor on the final play of this game for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, Von Miller is an issue. Um, Whether or not Von Miller will make it, healthy to the end of the year, I hope he does, because I think that football is more fun when Von Miller's playing, because seems like a great guy and he's a great player. And you like to beat the best. You don't want to beat the Bills down the road minus Von Miller. You want to go back out there and beat the Bills with Von Miller. That being said, I think we saw again this week there are situations where Andrew Wiley, he got beat a few different times really, really badly in pretty important situations. And the Chiefs' offensive line is supposed to be their strength, and they just can't seem to put together an entire game. Andrew Wiley struggled, and the Chiefs went away from the run a little bit. I felt like against the pass rush that Buffalo had, you really kind of had to come out and set the tone and run the ball well early on. And I felt like they struggled to establish the run a little bit, and then they got kind of one-dimensional, and it allowed Buffalo's defenders to kind of tee off on them. Now, that being said, like you said, these are the two best teams in the NFL. It's gonna come down to the wire every single time these two teams play. I'm not like, the sky isn't falling by any means. I don't think that there's another team that plays the Chiefs this close in the NFL. I think these are the two best teams in the NFL. One of these two teams should win the Super Bowl this year. If they don't, there's a problem.
So, and the reason why, even in a loss, again, the Kansas City Chiefs fall to the Buffalo Bills 24-20, but it was a great game overall, and not as high scoring shootout kind of contest as many of us thought it would be. But the reason I come away from this thing so encouraged is because of the Chiefs defense and the way this defense played the entire game. Like, at some point, when you're going up against quarterbacks like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, they're just going to do things that there's nothing you can do about. Like, we see them do it on a weekly basis. And on that final drive, you see, Josh Allen, who has no right to be as mobile as he is for the massive human being that he is, hurdles a Chiefs defender. And then the touchdown pass to Dawson Knox was absolutely absurd. Like, there's only two quarterbacks in the NFL that can make that kind of throw, and it's Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. And we got a glimpse of them today. And we're going to see this matchup every single year as long as these two dudes are playing, and they're going to continue to put on shows for us. So I'm thankful that we just get to watch these guys compete on a weekly basis. But I think the biggest takeaway from this game has to be the Chiefs defense, because that's the biggest deciding factor in this game, where they are at a clear disadvantage coming into this contest, not having Trent McDuffie, who they were hopeful was going to be available this week, not having Rashad Fenton, who has really struggled, but he's still a starting cornerback. And that leaves you with Joshua Williams, and that leaves you with Jalen Watson and L'Jarius Sneed. And those just aren't the cornerbacks you want to go up against Josh Allen with. And for the most part, they did a fantastic job trying to slow this Bills offense. Like, this offense is explosive, and they have multiple playmakers all over the field. And for the most part, they did a good job. Joshua Williams got beat for 2 touchdowns, but I mean, what do we want from him? Like, I don't think we can expect much more than we saw from him today. And I think it's so encouraging because this defense is already good. We can legitimately say this Kansas City Chiefs defense this season is maybe the most talented unit that Patrick Mahomes has had so far in his career. And they're going to get Willie Gay back, who I think is one of the most important players on their defense. They're going to get Trent McDuffie back. They're going to get Rashad Fenton back, and they're going to get healthy. So I don't think we've even seen the best version of this Chiefs defense yet. And I think that's why you have to be so encouraged about this game, even in a loss.
Yeah, I do. I think I agree with you. And I think, hats off to Spags in this game. He came in with a very depleted secondary, and you saw his strategy early on was the whole bend don't break defense. He was playing his wide receivers off the he's playing his cornerbacks and off the wide receivers a little bit, and then just dialing up the blitzes at all the right times. Like his whole game plan was, okay, keep everything in front of us, and then selectively blitz Josh Allen and trick him and get to the quarterback. And for the most part, it worked relatively well all night long. The problem is that when you live and die by the blitz, at some point it's not going to get home and you're going to get beat on a big play like what happened with Josh Williams. When Josh Williams got beat on that long touchdown, he was on man-to-man, with Gabe Davis, who is a stud. And that's not his fault. It's just the blitz didn't get home on that play, And so for the most part, Spags had an awesome game. But I think with Josh Allen, you saw a little bit of the difference between Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes as players today. Patrick Mahomes is amazing extending the play behind the line of scrimmage, much better than Josh Allen. But Josh Allen is the coolest customer in the world in that pocket. And with his offensive line, he has a lot of reason to be the coolest customer in the world. But because of that, when the blitz does get through, it gets to him, and he doesn't do the best job avoiding it.
And again, I want to remind you guys, if you're in the comments section, leave your comments from the game, your thoughts on the game, hashtag AP Rapid Reaction Show, and we will try to get to them at the end before we wrap things up and get you guys to the post-game press conferences. But I want to stick with the defense here before we really dive into the offensive performance, because I do think the offense did leave some things on the table today, but they're going against a defense, in my mind, the Buffalo Bills, that's legitimately a top 3 defense in the NFL. Like, they're a very, very good, well-rounded defense. And they're missing some guys, too, on that defense that are going to come back later in the year and have an impact for them. But the Kansas City Chiefs defense has been really impressive. And I think the only thing you can really gripe about at this point in the season is that they're not forcing turnovers, and you'd really like to see them do that more. Like, we need more turnovers. You need more defensive plays like that. But for the most part, they've stepped up and performed the way that you need them to, and the way that we've been kind of chasing this kind of defense for a long time. And there's still some questions about the pass rush, but we think the secondary is going to get better. Like, we know the linebackers are going to get better. And I think the pass rush can get better when you talk about a guy like George Karlaftis, who's still developing and still improving on a weekly basis. Like, this defense can be really, really good. And, holding the Buffalo Bills to 24 points, even at home, like, I think in most cases, Spags is going to take that. And he was really in his bag today. Like, I thought Spags called a fantastic game plan for the most part. And you mentioned it, you're going to live and die by the blitz. When you're playing quarterbacks of this caliber in the NFL, that's going to burn you sometimes. But the reason Josh Allen was struggling in the first half was because of those blitzes by Spags, because he was generating pressure on a quarterback that traditionally he starts to make mistakes when you put a lot of pressure on him. And so I understand that part of the game plan. And also, we got to talk about Nick Bolton. Nick Bolton was absolutely excellent in this game. Like, Nick Bolton is an ascending superstar linebacker, in my opinion. Like, I've seen enough of him. I understand he's never going to be that coverage guy, but Nick Bolton is incredible around the line of scrimmage, and he made multiple key plays for this defense today. I was incredibly impressed with his performance.
I mean, that's one of my main takeaways from this game, is that not just Nick Bolton, the Chiefs have elite linebackers on the whole, but Nick Bolton especially, he might be the best tackler in the entire NFL. I think that he's a future All-Pro, type of linebacker, one of those perennial guys, like a Bobby Wagner, something like that, who are really, and the thing that kind of just goes a little bit unnoticed about this with this game today, and the quality that defense played and the game that Nick Bolton played, he's got the green dot, man. He's the one out there getting everybody lined up. He's the one relaying the plays from the sidelines. He's the captain of that defense. And Nick, since he took over that role this year, I think he's done a phenomenal job. I can't say enough about the player that Nick Bolton is. I think that he was a steal, in the second round. This guy, the sky's the limit for Nick Bolton. And then Darius Harris coming out of nowhere. I mean, yeah. I think that at this point, when Gay comes back, your 3 linebackers have to be Gay, Bolton, and Harris. Like, you can't take Harris off the field. He's got to get the bulk of the snaps. He's just too electric. He's too good in the run game. He's too athletic. He can go sideline to sideline. I think that he's played his way into retaining a starting job.
I couldn't agree with you more on Darius Harris. He's been He's a guy who, stepped into this opportunity in a difficult situation in this defense. And you have noticed Darius Harris every single week that he's filled in for Willie Gay. Like, he has made plays every single week, and he's a fantastic run stuffer too. So you talk about Nick Bolton and Darius Harris around the line of scrimmage, and then you have your sideline to sideline coverage linebacker in Willie Gay, who is exceptional at that. Like, that linebacker group is all of a sudden really, really good and really exciting once Willie Gay is available next week for the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Like, these guys have done everything that they've been asked to do, and with a lot of injuries and significant injuries that should impact you in a lot of ways on that side of the ball. So, I mean, there was really only two drives in this game, Rocky, where two drives were the difference in this game. The 99-yard touchdown drive right before the half from the Bills, and then that final go-ahead touchdown drive. There was really only two drives where Josh Allen just said, screw this, and pulled a Patrick Mahomes and said, I'm just going to go out here and do things that there's nothing you can do about. And that's what he did. And you just see that in the NFL when you're talking about guys the caliber of these two quarterbacks. So I really don't think that you can be upset with much of what you saw from this defense today. I thought that they played fantastic given the circumstance. And getting into the offense now, like, they did leave some things on the table. When they had to settle for that field goal and give the ball back to Buffalo, I was like, I don't like that. That feels pretty crucial. That feels like a game deciding kind of drive. And it inevitably was. They just couldn't. Down the stretch, Von Miller was just working Andrew Wiley. And I don't think the Chiefs are going to be in play to, make a move along the offensive line at the trade deadline or anything like that. I feel like if they're going to do something like that, it might be for another pass rusher, like a veteran guy who wants more snaps or something on a winning team, not necessarily an offensive lineman. But it is starting to feel like Andrew Wiley is a little bit of a problem. And we knew that was probably going to be the case going against a defensive front that's as loaded as these Buffalo Bills are.
Yeah, I mean, the issue though is down the stretch, you get in the playoffs, you're going to be playing nothing but defenses like this. So if he's going to be a problem now, he's going to be a problem at the end of the season. And so you either have to make a move, or you got to hope that Lucas Niang comes back healthy. I love Andrew Wiley. I think he's a gutty player, and I think that he's a gamer and he gives everything he has. But he's not a starting right tackle in the NFL. I mean, that's just a fact of the matter. And I think that we have enough tape now that we can definitively say the Chiefs need to change something over there, because even in our own division, like, the pass rushers are too good. They're too good to leave Andrew Wiley out there every single drive. It puts Patrick Mahomes in a bad position, I mean, because you got a guy coming right in his face. He sees that pressure coming at him every single snap. He doesn't ever know if Andrew Wiley's going to hold up or not. And I think you see that with him pulling the ball down and trying to extend the play a little bit too much sometimes, or getting out of the pocket a little bit too much. And so, yeah, I mean, not to harp on Andrew Wiley too much, but I mean, there was definitely opportunities left on the field. We say all the time against the Chiefs, like, you got to score touchdowns against the Chiefs. You can't settle for 3 against the Chiefs. You got to finish with 7. The same thing is true for the Buffalo Bills. You can't settle for 3. You got to score touchdowns against the Buffalo Bills, or you're not going to stand a chance. And the Chiefs nearly did enough in this game, but nearly was not close. It was not good enough, and they just came up short.
Yeah, and as far as Patrick Mahomes goes, like, Mahomes was just regularly today making just unbelievable plays. Like, just, you mentioned it. There was some times where he probably held on to the ball too long and, ate some sacks, but this is one of the best defensive fronts in football. I mean, this defensive line goes 7 guys deep, like, that can put pressure on you on any given down in the regular season and in the postseason. So that's just what you have to do. But Patrick Mahomes did multiple times make unbelievable throws, like throws that only a player the caliber of himself can make. And he wanted this one. The Kansas City Chiefs clearly wanted this one, but ultimately the Buffalo Bills were just a little bit better today. And we have to talk about Juju Smith-Schuster, who finally had his big Kansas City Chiefs game. I feel like we've been chasing a Juju Smith-Schuster anytime touchdown for weeks now, and he finally found the end zone. And this was another play that you can see right now if you're viewing us on the Twitter feed. Mahomes extends the play, pump fake, and keeps the play alive to find Juju, who then breaks the tackle and breaks off the long touchdown run. It was a lot of plays like that today from Mahomes where he had to keep the play alive, keep the play alive, keep the play alive, and then make a ridiculous throw. And it's fantastic to see Patrick Mahomes make those kind of plays, but it was also nice to see Juju finally have that breakout game, because this is a full-blown 6 weeks into the season, full-blown wide receiver by committee approach by the Kansas City Chiefs, and it was nice to finally see Juju have a big game.
Yeah, I mean, Juju is the de facto number one wide receiver right now, and he's not your traditional number one wide receiver, but what he does bring to the table is that he's that chain mover, and he's a tough guy. Like, he's a tough son of a gun, and he's hard to bring down. He's a thick-bodied guy. He's not easy to tackle, and he's going to play through to the end of the play, and he's going to break as many tackles as he can along the way. I thought that Juju's been building up to this for the last couple of weeks. We've seen some pretty big plays out of Juju sporadically over the last 3 weeks or so. But today was the day where he really was able to just really break loose, really, one or two really big plays that accounted for most of his yards. But I mean, yeah, it was kind of the game we've been waiting to see out of Juju. And if we can get this kind of performance out of Juju Smith-Schuster each week, then the Chiefs are going to be in a decent position as far as their wide receivers go. I mean, they still kind of lack that big play threat a little bit. Like, Juju's not going to be able to break 3 tackles and score a touchdown every single week. They still need that big play threat guy. But I mean, yeah, the wide receivers look good today. MVS even looked good. He had that one touchdown that got called back because they called it encroachment instead of offsides, which we'll leave that for another day because that should have been a touchdown. But that's beside the point.
And I want to talk about Mecole Hardman, because Mecole Hardman had another nice game today. Now, he did have a play where he got held and they threw the flag, so it was ultimately a first down for the Chiefs, but he also got held and then gave up on the route, which is something we see a little too often from Mecole Hardman. But it does seem like they've fixed some of the things, some of the kinks that have always kind of plagued Mecole Hardman's game. It seems like the Chiefs have fixed some of those things. So we're starting to see him get more involved in the offense. And then he had a touchdown from Patrick Mahomes today that was, again, another play where Mahomes just keeps it alive, and then just fires a ridiculous laser to Mecole Hardman in the end zone for a touchdown. He had a nice game. MVS was kind of quiet today, and he had a bad drop early in the game. Travis Kelce is just elite of the elite. Like, overall, against this defense, against this secondary, against this pass rush, I think you just have to be pretty happy with the overall performance from this group of pass catchers coming into this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they looked good today. I mean, Sky Moore even got involved a little bit. Mahomes threw a dime to Sky Moore. That was pretty awesome. But yeah, in general, I mean, these guys did enough today. They got open. They caught the pass when they came their way. You didn't see any egregious drops. Mecole Hardman he looks better this year than he has ever looked before. He looks more like an actual wide receiver instead of just kind of a toolsy weapon type of guy that you have to scheme into the game. He's actually, going out, getting open and making plays. And so, yeah, hats off to the wide receivers. They did enough. I think at the end of the day, like, nobody on the Chiefs team played a bad game. They just came up short today. Like, that's the weird thing, is that you could point to the 2 throws by Mahomes that were probably bad throws on his interceptions. You can point to, Joshua Williams giving up a couple touchdowns, but those are just like isolated events. On the whole, the Chiefs didn't play bad football today. They just played a really good team, and they came up short.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't think you should be too upset with this Chiefs loss. I think that the Buffalo Bills are the best team in football, and the Chiefs went toe-to-toe with them for 4 quarters today. So I think that these are the 2 best teams in football. And I know the Sunday night game tonight, the Philadelphia Eagles, last undefeated team in the NFL, look like they're trying to play themselves in the conversation. But I think right now the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs are the class of the NFL, and that's what we saw on display today. Quick side note from Andy Reid. Andy Reid does confirm at the post-game press conference that the Chiefs did not suffer any significant injuries coming out of this football game. So that's always good news. We did see Jalen Watson exit the game late, and he wound up coming back in on the next play. So that's a little concerning for a banged up secondary. And Justin Reid left the game early on with some kind of ankle issue that he had to go get taped up on the sideline, but it appears that he's okay coming out of this game. So Chiefs are healthy, and another player they finally had back today was kicker Harrison Butker, who we haven't really talked about this. I think I mentioned it for a quick second. I mean, 12 seconds, you give up a 99-yard touchdown drive to Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills as they take the lead, and you think, okay, we're going to head into halftime. Well, the Chiefs have 12 seconds. They have two fantastically executed plays to get themselves into field goal range, a 62-yard field goal by kicker Harrison Butker with 1 second left on the clock just before half to tie the game. It was an incredible sequence. It was a little bit of a flashback to last year's playoff game. Butker did miss a field goal later in the game that wound up being a little costly, but coming back from injury, it's just good to see him drill that field goal at the end of the half and know that they've got their kicker back and he's going to be healthy, hopefully, for the rest of the season.
Undoubtedly, um, it's good to have him back. You see the difference between him and a replacement kicker. Right out the back with that 62-yard bomb. R.I.P. Matt Wright's record, though. I mean, poor guy. He comes in admirably, sets the Chiefs record, and it lasts for all of a week before Harrison Butker comes back and breaks it by 3 yards. That's a little brutal for the poor guy, but I think that we see this with Butker, though. Also, he had a missed field goal today that he should have made. He'll make these 62-yarders, and then he misses the shorter ones, or he'll miss a point after attempt. Like the Chiefs have two of the most talented kickers in the NFL. In Tommy Townsend and Harrison Butker. You just got to get that consistency out of Butker week in and week out, where we have those extra 3 points. I mean, maybe the game ends up differently if he makes that field goal that he missed. Mahomes isn't thinking that he has to score a touchdown to win the game, but he just has to get into field goal range for Butker, to win. And so, those 3 points are important, and you can't leave them on the field. And we've seen that Andy, if he doesn't trust his kicker, coaches the game differently and not in a good way. So I'm glad to have Butker back. I would just like to see a little bit more consistency from him. Now, that being said, I got to be easier on the guy. He's been out since week 1, comes in, and I'm expecting him to be in midseason form, so that's a little unfair on my part. But at the same time, it's what your team needed from you today. But I do want to mention Tommy Townsend is the best punter in the NFL. Like, there's not another punter
really good.
That's just dropping dimes inside the 20 and back. Like, there was multiple times that the Chiefs were backed up and you expected the Bills to have good field position, and Tommy Townsend just flipped the field with his leg. Like, he is like he was a little inconsistent last year, but for all of that, he has been nails all year long this year. I mean, I can't think of another punter that is as big of a weapon right now in the NFL than Tommy Townsend.
I believe we did see McCole Hardman actually return a punt kind of later in the game. I'd be curious, and we'll probably find out later in the week when we hear from special teams coordinator Dave Tobe, if that was a McColl's kind of stepping into the Tyreek role, like late game situation. You need a play, so you put him back there over Sky Moore, or if, they're kind of, Sky hasn't necessarily been like a game-changing punt returner, and maybe we could do better back there with McCole Hardman. So that's something to keep an eye on at arrowheadpride.com this week as we look to get some answers after this Chiefs loss to the Buffalo Bills. If you're listening on the podcast page, as always, make sure that you stick around after the show. We've got the post-game press conferences for you. We'll hear from Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, whoever else is available to us. But let's get to some of the audience reaction from the Chiefs 24-20 loss to the Buffalo Bills. Again, hashtag AP Rapid Reaction if you want to sneak a couple in before we wrap things up here. Do you think that we will keep Juju Smith-Schuster and MVS next season? Well, MVS is still under contract next season. I believe Juju's on a 1-year deal, so he is likely not going to return next season. I would think that I'd kind of be shocked if they kept both of them. I don't think there's a chance that both of them are back. Maybe MVS is still back because he's on a 2-year deal, but I think it's kind of a funny money contract where they can get out of it pretty easily before next season. I think they intentionally sign those short-term deals with these wide receivers because they're not going to be a major part of the Chiefs' plan moving forward. So I'd be pretty surprised if they bring them both back. I would say one, maybe, definitely not both of them.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think honestly, I think because MVS is already technically still under contract, they're going to keep him under contract. I think MVS is back. I think Juju's going back to Pittsburgh. I think he just didn't want to play with a rookie quarterback this year, and he wanted to let the quarterback get a year under his belt, and might as well go chase a ring with Patrick Mahomes for a year while you're waiting in this interim year. I think that part of the reason why he only signed a 1-year deal. I think it was a win-win. Chiefs wanted him on a 1-year deal. He only wanted to be on a 1-year deal. I think next year you're going to go, into the season with Sky Moore and MVS as your 1-2 wide receivers. I don't think McColl's going to be back, and I think they'll probably bring back Watson, and those are going to be your 3 wide receivers, and then they'll probably add somebody in the draft and then sign another journeyman, type of wide receiver, in free agency, like a Russell Gage or something like that. But I don't see Juju coming back after this year unless he balls out this second half of the season and they can't afford not to throw money at him.
Yeah, and we'll see. And maybe Justin Ross is somebody that maybe they can develop into something. We'll see. He's obviously not going to play for them this year, but it's something to keep an eye on as we head into next season. This is from Pete. Rookies are getting a lot of really good reps when it's going to matter in the year. Where is Lucas Niang? Defensive linemen are drooling when they see Wiley lined up against him. So that is interesting. That could possibly be your answer at right tackle if Lucas Niang ever comes back and is healthy. I would say that I'm not super hopeful for Lucas Niang because the Chiefs have been very silent about his injury problems and his rehab and like where he's at. Like there just hasn't been a lot of noise around him, and that generally means that the Chiefs just don't have very high expectations for him this season. And Lucas Niang was a guy that we were hopeful to actually develop into potentially like a future cornerstone tackle or something like that. But when he's gotten opportunities, he's really struggled. So even if he comes back healthy at some point this season, I think Andrew Wiley would have to be really, really struggling for the Chiefs to say, okay, we're going to give Lucas Niang a shot here.
Yeah, I think the fact also that they invested a draft pick in Darian Kennard meant that they didn't feel good about Lucas Niang's availability, not just this year, but maybe like his sustainability moving forward. I like Lucas Niang. I think he's better than Andrew Wiley. I think he's serviceable. But he's had 2 straight pretty serious injuries, and he's not a small dude. I mean, at his size, the type of injuries that he's been suffering. There's going to be some deterioration of ability at some point, even though he's a young guy. So I think the Chiefs are waiting to wait and see how he comes back, but I don't think that they're banking on him by any means.
Yeah, I'd be really shocked if they were hoping that Lucas Niang was going to be their late season answer at right tackle. I just don't necessarily see it happening, but we'll see. I do hope that he gets healthy and gets on the field for them sometime here in the near future. From Greg, CEH had another meh game. Pacheco should have got more carries. Yeah, I mean, I would like to see Isaiah Pacheco carve out more of a role for himself. I just don't know. And, this could obviously change the same way we think that Sky Moore could wind up carving out a bigger role for himself at some point in the season. I just think this is the Chiefs running back rotation. Like, this is how it's going to be all season long. And, Clyde had some nice runs today. He also had some bad runs. And Jerick McKinnon had, a couple nice catches and, extended some plays, and they used him in short yardage again. I don't know why the hell they're still doing that. But then Isaiah Pacheco looks like he might be the best, like, hard runner. We still haven't seen, like, gotten a full glimpse of his explosion necessarily, but I would definitely like to see him get more work. I just don't think there's any chance that he's overtaking Clyde this season. I just don't think that it's in the Chiefs' game plan.
No, and I've probably been harder on Clyde in his time at Kansas City than almost anybody at Arrowhead Pride. I'm not a huge Clyde believer, um, but I'll say this: every single time I count Clyde out this year, he comes back and has a good game and has some really good runs. And so this game he was mad. I bet you next week he's going to break off 3 rushes for 75 yards or something stupid like that, and then make us question it again. As far as Pacheco goes, I'm a big Pacheco fan. You can see how hard he runs, but I'll say this: you gotta kind of qualify it a little bit. He's such a hard runner, but we don't see those explosive plays out of him, necessarily. And we see good plays. We
Yeah.
don't see those huge plays. And so there's a piece there that's missing. I don't know what that piece is. I can't put my hand on it. Is he too impatient? I don't think so. I think he's gotten more patient. I think he's waiting for his blocks to develop. Maybe it's just a number of reps. I don't know. But there's still a small piece that's just not quite there yet with him that to kind of fully unlock him,
I,
before he's effective.
I do think that Isaiah Pacheco has shown some problems with his vision so far and the early opportunities that he's gotten. Like, the best running backs in the NFL, they find the space and break off those long runs where it seems like sometimes he's not necessarily looking for the space. He's kind of looking for the contact. And that's why we haven't seen like, a 40-yard Isaiah Pacheco run, but we've seen a handful of, 10 to 15-yard runs so far this season. But with his speed and athleticism, you would assume that dude's got a 50-yard touchdown in him. I think he's just got to work on some of his vision. I think that's something you can develop a little bit more as we move into the season. I just, again, I just don't think that he's going to carve out a big enough role here as a rookie in this Chiefs offense to be somebody that we can depend on a weekly basis. Final thing, why is Spags leaving people on an island to defend a top 3 wide receiver in the game? Have to get better at run blocking. We've been good for a game. Pass blocking has to be better. I'm just going to address the Spags part of this. I get it. I understand it. Joshua Williams being one-on-one with Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis when the Bills are driving at crucial moments of the game seems like a bad idea. And then last week it was Devontae Adams and Jalen Watson and Brian Cook trying to bracket the best wide receiver in football at a crucial moment in the game. And those are just the things I think you have to live with Spags. And I thought for the most part, at least in the first half, I thought Spags was excellent outside of that 99-yard drive at the end of the half. I thought that Spags was totally dialing things up. I think that Spags has had some brilliant moments this season, and then he's had some Spags moments where you're like, why are you zero blitzing right there? Like, just play to stop them from converting. Like, we didn't need the big time blitz right there. But that's always who Spags has been. That's something that we just have to live with because when it works really well. And when you get burned by it, you get burned by it for a long touchdown usually.
I think the island thing, I bash my head against the wall for parts of Chiefs games when Spags leaves these, seventh rounders out on the island against a Pro Bowl wide receiver. But you know what? Spags has done that his entire career. The issue is that, Spags does like to blitz. But the reason why he likes to blitz, I think, right now with this Chiefs team is that we're not getting home with 4 rushers. If we could get home with 4, in order to not have to play man coverage against a guy on the outside, then your 4 down linemen have to create pass rush consistently against the quarterback. If the quarterback can just sit there all day long and just scan the field, it doesn't matter how many people you drop into coverage. At some point, the coverage is going to fail, and he's going to get a completion, and they're going to move the ball easily. They're just going to pick you apart. And so I think the Chiefs pass rush has not been good enough. Chris Jones has been amazing, but on the edge rushers, what edge rusher has consistently created pressure? Carlos Dunlap's had a couple highlight plays. Frank Clark got held a few times today, but outside of that, like, the numbers haven't been there from the edge rushers, to give Spags confidence that he can double team a guy or drop back into zone or something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point by you, Rocky. It's, we saw last week how much better that Raiders secondary looked when Chandler Jones and Max Crosby were winning on virtually every single rep against the Chiefs offensive line in the first half of that game. And they do need to do something about that. That's why I think it's more likely if there's a veteran edge rusher available at the trade deadline, kind of like Melvin Ingram was last year, they could be in play for that, because Carlos Dunlap is fine. He's shown some moments, and he's a good, veteran rotational guy who can get some pressure and make a play for you here and there. George Karlaftis is still developing. He's still figuring out how to be an NFL edge rusher. And, I think really we should all be thrilled with the returns from George Karlaftis so far. Like, he's looked like he's going to be a good player for them. We'll see. I'm not ready to establish a ceiling for George Karlaftis as a player, but yeah, the edge pressure is going to be a problem for them. They had Mike Dana back this game, but it was an issue coming into the season, and it was something we were well aware of, because I don't have any faith in Frank Clark at this point. So we'll see how it goes. But the edge pressure can be a huge help to the secondary. And so when those guys aren't winning up front, then your secondary gets exposed. And that's a huge part of Spags' defense. So I think it's a great point by you, Rocky. But again, Chiefs lose, unfortunately, 24-20 to the Buffalo Bills. They improved to 4-2 on the season, or I guess fall to 4-2 on the season, and take on the San Francisco 49ers next week, which the Niners, I'm looking forward to breaking down that game with you guys at Arrowhead Pride, because that team has a lot of injuries, and they suffered a pretty terrible loss today themselves to the Atlanta Falcons. So we'll see what happens with the 49ers next week, but I think all signs are pointing to a big game for the Kansas City Chiefs. Please make sure you follow Rocky on Twitter at Rocky Magana. You can follow Kramer at Kramer Talks. I'm Steven Serda. That's where you can find me. Again, stick around after the show for all of the post-game press conference. We appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you soon.